Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. At the time of making this video, it's been 7 years since the release of 13 Reasons Why. In commemoration, I wanted to discuss the legacy the show left behind. This will be part 1 of a 2-video series discussing the impact of this show. I want to give my personal review and experience of 13 Reasons Why, not only to discuss where I stand on the whole topic, but to separate my feelings from a more statistical analysis, which is what I'll discuss in part 2. Of course, I will be discussing a lot of heavy topics here, such as rape, depression, and of course, suicide. So if you've been affected by any of these, this video may not be for you. With that out of the way, let's jump in. So for me, 13 Reasons Why was really my introduction to mental health. The show came out on Netflix and there was immediately a lot of buzz surrounding the show. Hearing about it, I ended up watching. The show came out when I was in high school, and by then I'd luckily never had to deal with trauma like Hannah had. Seeing her story unfold through Clay's eyes really opened me up to a lot of issues. Slut shaming, rape, depression, and of course, suicide. What I personally admire about season 1 is that we can really see Hannah's deterioration. You see how happy and full of joy she is in the beginning. Her whole life is ahead of her. But because of the cruel or immature actions of the people around her, she slowly enters this cycle of pain. There are numerous times she tries to look for avenues of escapism. New friends, poetry, a new haircut, even a counselor. But due to the failure of almost everyone around her, she just couldn't do it anymore. This pressure that Hannah felt is something I hadn't seen or experienced when I first watched the show. So her struggle really made me empathize with her. It probably helps that I really identified with Clay at the time I watched it. And in many ways, I still do. Seeing his pain, knowing there's nothing he could do, is exactly how I felt whenever I saw Hannah get worse. I'll discuss the problems the show created with its portrayal of suicide in my next video, but I personally thought season 1 did a great job of informing me about different issues and using the tools I learned from the show to help those in situations similar to Hannah. Later in my life, I would encounter 2 friends who were in some really dark times and were honestly really close to taking their lives. Now, I understand that a lot of people hate the show because they believe it's only done more harm to those vulnerable to suicide. But if it hadn't been for 13 Reasons Why, I don't know if I would have been able to save them. I also think season 1 was able to balance portraying the issues Hannah went through while also telling a good story. I really like the narrative structure of the show. We follow both Clay and Hannah's journeys in their timelines. The first 2 seasons also have a nice episodic structure to it. Every episode contains its own storyline while also contributing to the wider narrative. I think that's something missing in a lot of TV today. Clay's character arc in the first 2 seasons is really good. He was always the guy who avoided drama. He didn't have the time or the care for it. But because Clay was always super uninvolved, he was a complete bystander when Hannah needed him. Through the tapes, Clay is able to have a wake-up call that allows him to stand up for justice. Everyone, including the school's administration, is too afraid or arrogant to change anything. But it's because of Clay's anger and persistence that we can start to see things change at Liberty High. Oh, and Tony is the GOAT. I cannot stress how much I love his character. This dude is literally carrying Clay's back throughout the entire show. 10 out of 10 character. Now, even though I think season 1 is near perfect from a narrative perspective, I do have to bring up Hannah's death scene. Jeez, what was Netflix thinking here? In the book, Hannah takes her life using pills. This is how she describes her thought process about taking her life. A warning, this might be disturbing to hear, so skip to this time frame if you don't want to hear it. Ready? Okay.
But sometimes I took things further and wondered how I would do it. I would tuck myself into bed and wonder if there was anything in the house I could use. What about hanging? Well, what would I use? Where would I do it? And even if I knew what and where, I could never get beyond the visual of someone finding me, swinging, inches from the floor. I couldn't do that to Mom and Dad. Oh, how did they find you? I've heard so many rumors. So I've decided on the least painful way possible. Pills.
We can see how this thought process makes sense for Hannah's character. She doesn't want her parents to see her in such a terrible way. And of course, the whole point is that Hannah doesn't want to feel any more pain. So this makes sense. In the show, she chooses literally the most painful way to end herself. That's the complete opposite of what Book Hannah intended. I'm sure her parents seeing a bloody bathtub is much better than seeing her hanging body. Thanks, Netflix. I can't see a good reason for this change. Maybe it's to show how bad suicide is, but to me it just comes off as making a dramatic scene for shock and attention. How Hannah dies doesn't really matter. What matters is how that affects everyone around her, which luckily is something the show was able to focus on most of the time. Now we move on to season 2. I think for the most part this was a good continuation of the story. The expansion of the world and its spirit seems in line with Jay Asher's original vision. I really like Sky's arc in particular, as we finally see her change after everything she's been through. Of course, Clay steals the show again as he continues to struggle over Hannah's death, especially as her trial is ongoing. Once again, he's the driving force for justice, not only for Hannah and her family, but for Jessica and Justin. At times, this season feels a lot like a detective thriller that has both its good and bad moments. I like the stuff when Clay is trying to uncover the secrets of the jocks because it's part of that overall theme of bringing people to justice. However, other reveals like seeing portions of Hannah's past really bug me. This is really where we get to see the show Netflixified. For example, it's revealed that at Hannah's past school, she herself was a bully and was also responsible for starting a harassment campaign against a girl. This goes completely against Hannah's character, at least in the beginning of season 1. At that point, she was really compassionate, and the show almost makes her experience seem like karma for the harm she caused. That goes directly against the show's message. I also don't think it makes sense that Hannah was with Zach the summer before she died. Clay literally asked the same question. I don't really think she would have given anybody on the tapes a second chance, given her deteriorating mental state. And what is it with all these sexual scenes? I'm sorry if I don't want to see a whole bunch of high schoolers get it on. That ain't it, Chief. Besides those qualms, I do think the second season delivered, and I like where a lot of the characters went. Justin has an amazing character arc. He starts off almost cartoonishly evil when we first meet him, but his backstory really lets us understand why he is who he is. That doesn't excuse any of his actions, but it allows us to forgive him when he finally does have his change of heart. Unlike Bryce. So, as a disclaimer, I did not watch past the second season. The writing was just so bad after that. Annie is so annoying. But let's get back to Bryce. So, season 3's main focus is seeing if someone as horrible as Bryce Walker could ever be redeemed. And in concept, I don't think that's inherently a bad thought process. I mean, a lot of people love Darth Vader, and he's done a ton of terrible things. He's responsible for leading the galaxy into 20 years of a totalitarian regime, indirectly responsible for millions being enslaved, slaughtered who knows how many rebels or innocent civilians. He's literally killed children. But because he redeems himself in the end, everyone loves his character and his story. Bryce is a terrible person, no doubt, but if we're keeping it a $1.50, he's nowhere near Darth Vader levels of evil. So in concept, I do think this would have been an interesting storyline. But the show completely dropped the ball. Because we immediately start off the season with his death. we have to resort to the flashback system again, so we go to uncovering the mystery of his death rather than giving justice to such a heavy topic. So instead of being an introspective story, what we get is just
Where are you? We got some work to do now.
Bryce gets a weird character shift because he was almost cartoonishly evil up until season 3, but then he automatically becomes humanized. Now, I know we get a small glimpse of this in season 2, but we shouldn't have such a massive shift for such an important story. Besides, Bryce really does need to face justice for his actions. A simple death is nowhere near enough what he needs to face. Thanks again, Netflix. Also, it seems that Tyler's story was basically an afterthought because all the consequences that we saw from the end of season 2 are pretty much handled in the first episode of season 3. If I'd written the show, I'd have Tyler be the main focus of season 3. Perhaps he runs away and it's up to our heroes to find him and give him the help he needs. We could see more small glimpses of Bryce's backstory here, but that being the main focus would be shifted to season 4. That way we give justice to these stories instead of just making a muddled mess. Now, I don't have much to say about season 4 since I know almost nothing about it. I know a big focus is Clay trying to come to terms with the events of the show, especially through visions of Bryce and Monty. I do think that's a good way to end out the story, as Clay has really been the main character from the start. Other than that, I'd defer to Alex Meyer's review of the show, which I think does a good job explaining the problems with season 4, especially to someone who hasn't seen it. Link in the description. All in all, I take away the good parts of the show, both narratively and what it did to teach me about mental health. That's not an excuse for some of the things the show caused, which, again, I will discuss in my next video, but I am personally indebted to 13 Reasons Why for helping me save lives. But let me know what your thoughts on 13 Reasons Why are. I know the show has a very complicated reaction from people, so I'm genuinely curious what you have to say about it. Your comment may even appear on my next video covering this topic. If you or anyone you know is going through a crisis, I've put some links and info in the description. Things will get better. Thanks for watching, and may the force be with you.